They thought they were hitting a helpless cargo ship, but this time it was a US Navy destroyer, and the Houthis made a serious mistake. In early April 2025, after another wave of Houthi drone strikes in the Red Sea, the US Navy was no longer playing defense. In the middle of the Red Sea, a swarm of incoming drones lit up the radar screens like fireworks on the 4th of July. The Houthi rebels had struck again, part of a string of attacks that's been growing bolder by the week. But on this particular day, they picked the wrong target. The destroyer they locked onto wasn't just any ship. It was equipped with the kind of tech that doesn't just defend, it fights back. Within seconds, alarms blared, defensive systems kicked in, and the Houthi assault got turned into scrap metal before it even reached striking distance. And that was just the beginning. Because what came next? It was the kind of response that made the whole region take a step back. What actually happens when a rebel group attacks a US warship by mistake? The Red Sea isn't just a trade route anymore, it's a war zone. Since late 2023, the Houthi rebels in Yemen have launched wave after wave of drone and missile attacks on ships passing through these waters. They claim it's about supporting Palestine, but their targets have ranged from commercial cargo carriers to US Navy destroyers. In their minds, anyone linked to the West is fair game, but their tactics? Sloppy, unpredictable, and increasingly dangerous. And the US Navy has been right there in the middle of it. Let's talk numbers. Over 40 confirmed attacks on Red Sea vessels in just a few months. Dozens of one-way attack drones, anti-ship cruise missiles, and even ballistic missiles, yes, actual ballistic missiles, have been launched towards maritime targets. Many of them were intercepted mid-air. Others struck civilian ships. Several tankers had to be abandoned or rerouted. Billions of dollars in cargo is now taking the long way around Africa, adding weeks to delivery times. But not every ship ran. Some fought back. Ships like the USS Carney, USS Bravely, and USS Laboon have been tasked with protecting commercial shipping under Operation Prosperity Guardian. And they've been busy. The Carney alone has shot down over 40 drones and missiles in multiple engagements. These aren't warning shots. They're full-on combat intercepts using high-tech systems like the Aegis Combat System, standard missiles SM-2 and SM-6, and Phalanx CIWS. Those fast-spinning Gatling guns that shoot drones out of the sky at 4,500 rounds per minute? Yeah, those babies. One attack, though, stood out. A Houthi drone swarm launched from western Yemen came buzzing across the water. It looked like another strike on a vulnerable tanker. But the blip they were chasing on radar wasn't carrying oil. It was an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Within seconds, its radar lit up, tracking targets from miles out. Orders were barked, the deck came alive, and then, one by one, the sky lit up as missiles and drones exploded mid-air. The Houthis had made a fatal miscalculation. These aren't the kind of ships you sneak up on. The Aegis system scans the horizon constantly. Air, surface, subsurface. It doesn't blink. Once a target is tagged as hostile, it calculates the perfect intercept solution in milliseconds. Combine that with the SM-6s that can swat missiles out of the sky at Mach 3.5 and CIWS that turns incoming threats into confetti, and you've got a floating fortress. Because whatever their intention is, one thing is clear. They've turned a global shipping lane into a live fire zone, and they just picked the wrong fight. It happened fast, too fast for the Houthis to realize that they just kicked the wrong hornet's nest. The Red Sea was already on edge. US destroyers had been running round-the-clock intercept missions, and satellite surveillance had picked up signs of another launch. From western Yemen, near Al Hudaydah, a salvo of drones and at least one anti-ship missile was launched. Their intended target? Probably a commercial vessel flagged out of Europe. But thanks to bad intelligence, or maybe just bad luck, the Houthis had locked onto a ghost on their screen. One that turned out to be a fully armed US Navy destroyer. Let's be clear about something. This wasn't just some rusty old warship. This was an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, one of the most lethal platforms in the Navy's arsenal. Sleek, silent, but wired for absolute chaos if provoked. At first, all seemed calm. The ship was running routine escort operations, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, the electronic warfare team picked up strange radar echoes. Moments later, the Aegis Combat System auto-tagged multiple inbound threats. The officer of the deck called it out. Vampires inbound, multiple bearing 270. Vampire being Navy slang for incoming missiles. Alarms screamed, sailors sprinted to battle stations, and in a heartbeat, the destroyer flipped the switch from routine to full combat posture. The Aegis system did what it was built to do: identify, track, and neutralize. Within seconds, it calculated the flight paths of incoming drones and missiles. SM-2 missiles roared off the vertical launch system. From the bridge, it looked like thunderbolts launching into the sky. A drone exploded mid-air, raining fragments harmlessly into the sea. Another fall, and another, and another. But they kept coming. That's when the CIWS, or the Close-In Weapon System, kicked in. Mounted fore and aft, these automated Gatling cannons spin up to 4,500 rounds per minute. When they lock on, it sounds like a buzzsaw chewing through the air. A final drone tried a last-minute dive, gone in an instant, shredded mid-plunge. In the span of 90 seconds, the engagement was over. 0 hits, 0 damage, total dominance. Houthis most likely thought they were sending a message. Instead, they sent their drones into a digital wood chipper, and unknowingly handed the US Navy the green light for a response. Here's the thing, these kinds of attacks don't just test defenses, they test resolve. And this time, the answer came quickly. A few hours later, pilots were suiting up. Flight decks were cleared. Retaliation wasn't just coming, it was already in motion. But before we get there, imagine you're standing on that destroyer, watching the night sky light up with explosions just hundreds of feet above your head. If you were in command, how would you respond? Full retaliation or strategic restraint? Let us know down below. No wrong answers, just your take. Because in this game, every second counts, and the Houthis just ran out of time. The moment the last drone hit the water, the decision was already made. The Houthis had crossed a line again. But this time, they hadn't just disrupted global shipping. They hadn't just endangered civilian crews. No, this time they had gone head-to-head with a US Navy warship and lost. And when you take a swing at the US Navy and miss, you don't just get a warning, you get warplanes. Back at CENTCOM, retaliation orders were already in motion. Target packages were prepared, coordinates locked, and pilots briefed. Within hours, jets lifted off from a nearby carrier strike group stationed in the Arabian Sea. They weren't headed for a patrol. This was a precision response. The operation focused on a Houthi-controlled launch site near the port city of Hodeidah, a well-known staging area for drone and missile attacks. Using FA-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, and unmanned MQ-9 drones, ISR, Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, the U.S. coordinated a multi-phase strike package with one clear goal: cripple their ability to launch again. Phase 1, electronic warfare. Growlers moved in first, jamming enemy radar and communication systems. Silence is deadly when you depend on early warnings. Phase 2, suppression of air defenses. Precision-guided munitions, likely AGM-88